"Where were you last night, Vincent?" I asked, watching my husband of 23 years fumble with his gym bag at the kitchen counter. "I told you, Karen. I had to stay late with a client. She needed extra help with her flexibility training," Vincent replied, not meeting my eyes as he grabbed his protein shake. Something about the way he said flexibility training made my stomach turn. At 47, I wasn't naive about the world, and after working in human resources for Bright-Rise Systems for 15 years, I could spot a lie from across a conference room. My husband's tells were becoming as obvious as a neon sign. The way he avoided eye contact, the nervous clearing of his throat, and most tellingly, the faint scent of vanilla perfume that definitely wasn't mine clinging to his workout clothes. "That's 3 nights this week, Vince. Business must be booming at Sundale Fitness," I said, stirring my coffee with deliberate calm. Vincent, at 52, had always been proud of his physique. Even now, his graying temples and laugh lines couldn't hide the fact that he still turned heads at the gym, where he worked as a personal trainer. But lately, those heads he was turning seemed to be getting younger and younger, and his explanations were getting thinner and thinner. "You know how it is. Summer's coming. Everyone wants to get in shape," he said, kissing my forehead in that perfunctory way that had replaced real affection years ago. "Besides, the extra money will help with the house payments." I watched him leave through the kitchen window, his pickup truck rumbling to life in our driveway in Phoenix, Arizona. The desert sun was already blazing at 8 in the morning, promising another scorching day. As Vincent backed out, I noticed something that made my blood run colder than our air conditioning. He was humming. Vincent never hummed unless he was genuinely happy about something, and it sure wasn't because of our morning conversation. That evening, I decided to do a little investigation of my own. While Vincent showered, I slipped outside to his truck. The summer heat still radiated from the metal, making me squint as I opened the driver's side door. The interior smelled like his cologne mixed with something sweeter, more feminine. I ran my hands under the seats, checking the glove compartment, looking for anything that might confirm my growing suspicions. That's when my fingers closed around something small and tube-shaped wedged under the driver's seat. I pulled it out and stared at it in the dim light from the garage. Personal lubricant. The expensive kind. The kind Vincent and I definitely didn't use anymore, since our intimate life had become as dry as the Arizona landscape around us. My hands trembled slightly as I held the evidence of what I already knew in my heart. I sat in my car in the garage for several minutes, staring at the tube in my hands. 23 years of marriage, and this is what it had come to. I thought about all the signs I had ignored. The new clothes, the sudden interest in protein supplements that promised to boost energy and vitality, the way he started doing extra laundry and taking longer showers. Vincent had always been charming. That's what attracted me to him when we met at a community college fitness class in 2001. I was 24, fresh out of my human resources degree program, and he was 29, already working as a trainer with dreams of opening his own gym someday. He had this way of making everyone feel like they were the most important person in the room, whether he was helping an elderly woman learn to use the elliptical or teaching a nervous teenager how to lift weights properly. Back then, I loved that quality about him. I loved watching him light up when he talked about helping people transform their bodies and their confidence. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony at a resort in Sedona, surrounded by red rocks and big dreams. For years, we talked about having children, maybe buying a bigger house, possibly even that gym he always wanted. But somewhere along the way, those dreams faded. The gym never materialized because Vincent could never save enough money or commit to a business plan. The children never came because we could never agree on timing. And then suddenly we were in our 40s, and the conversation just stopped happening. The bigger house remained a fantasy, as we struggled with the mortgage on our modest 3-bedroom ranch in a decent neighborhood near Camelback Mountain. I started to notice changes about 6 months ago. Vincent began working later and taking on more clients, which should have been good news for our finances. But instead of being tired when he came home, he seemed energized, almost giddy. He started buying new workout clothes, expensive ones from brands I'd never heard of. He upgraded his phone and became protective of it, taking it with him to the bathroom and keeping it face down during dinner. Then there were the mysterious phone calls that he would step outside to take, claiming they were from clients with scheduling questions. The way he started talking about one client in particular, a young woman named Kylie, who was really dedicated to her fitness journey and needed specialized attention for her unique goals. I had never been the jealous type. In our early years, I was secure in our relationship and proud that other women found my husband attractive. But this felt different. This felt like he was slipping away from me, one late-night training session at a time. The worst part was how he tried to make me feel crazy for noticing. When I asked about the perfume smell, he said it was from cleaning products at the gym. When I mentioned his new clothes, he claimed his old ones were getting worn out. When I questioned the late nights, he acted like I was being controlling and unsupportive of his career. But now I had proof. Hard, tangible evidence that my instincts were right. I slipped the tube into my pocket and went back inside, my mind racing with possibilities. I could confront him directly, but I knew Vincent well enough to know he would deny everything and probably get angry at me for snooping through his truck. I could hire a private investigator, but that felt both expensive and humiliating. Or I could do what my human resources training had taught me to do when dealing with workplace problems, gather more information, and develop a strategic response. Over the next few days, I became a detective in my own marriage. I started paying closer attention to Vincent's patterns. He worked late on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, always returning home around 10 p.m. with stories about his dedicated client, Kylie. He was always freshly showered when he got home, claiming the gym's facilities were better than ours. His phone buzzed constantly with what he said were fitness app notifications. I also did some social media investigation. It didn't take long to find Kylie Morrison on Instagram. 23 years old, blonde, with the kind of artificially enhanced curves that required both good genetics and a skilled surgeon. Her profile was full of gym selfies and inspirational quotes about living your best life and age is just a number. She had recently started posting videos of her workouts, always filmed from flattering angles that showed off her technique and her trainer's strong hands guiding her form. The trainer was clearly Vincent, though his face was usually just out of frame. But I recognized his voice giving encouragement, his laugh when she made jokes, and especially his hands. I had been married to those hands for over 2 decades. The videos were posted on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings, always around the same time Vincent was supposedly helping with her flexibility training. The comments were full of fire emojis and thirsty responses from men asking about personal training availability. Kylie responded to some of them with winky faces and promises that her trainer was the best and really knows how to work out all the kinks. What pushed me over the edge was a video posted the previous Friday. It was filmed in what looked like a private studio or apartment, not the main gym floor. Kylie was doing stretches that seemed more appropriate for an adult entertainment website than a fitness routine, and Vincent's voice could be heard clearly in the background saying, "That's perfect, baby. Hold that position for me." Baby. He called her baby. I sat in my office at Bright Rise Systems, supposedly reviewing employee files, but actually planning my response to this betrayal. I could have chosen the high road. I could have packed my bags and filed for divorce like a mature adult. I could have confronted them both and demanded explanations and apologies. Instead, I decided to get creative. If Vincent wanted to play games with tubes of lubricant, then we were going to play a game. But this time, I was going to control the rules, and I was going to make sure that everyone involved learned a lesson they would never forget. That Saturday morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Vincent was still sleeping, snoring softly beside me like he didn't have a care in the world. I slipped out of bed and made my way to the kitchen, where I started my day with a cup of coffee and a very specific shopping list. My first stop was Home Depot. I walked through the aisles with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. In the adhesives section, I found what I needed: Gorilla Glue Professional Grade, the kind that creates an instant, permanent bond, that can only be separated with industrial solvents, or, in extreme cases, medical intervention. The teenage cashier barely looked up as he rang up my purchase. "Working on a project?" he asked with the polite disinterest of someone making minimum wage. "You could say that," I replied, smiling sweetly. "Something that needs to stick forever." My second stop was a medical supply store where I purchased a large syringe, the kind used for administering medications to livestock. The clerk asked if I had horses, and I told her I was helping a friend with her ranch animals. Another small lie in what was becoming a very strategic operation. Back home, Vincent was in the shower, getting ready for what he claimed was a Saturday morning training session with a new client who could only meet on weekends. I could hear him humming again, that same contented sound that now made my skin crawl. I worked quickly and carefully in the kitchen. Using the syringe, I extracted every drop of lubricant from the tube I had found in his truck. Then, with the precision of someone who had spent years managing employee benefits and workplace safety protocols, I refilled it with the Gorilla Glue. The consistency was remarkably similar, and the tube resealed perfectly. Unless someone squeezed it out and examined it closely, they would never know the difference. I wiped down the tube, removing any fingerprints, and slipped it back under Vincent's driver's seat exactly where I had found it. My heart was pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and satisfaction. This wasn't just about catching a cheater. This was about ensuring that the consequences of his actions would be immediate, undeniable, and unforgettable. Vincent emerged from the shower looking like he was heading to a photo shoot instead of a training session. He had trimmed his beard, used the expensive cologne I had bought him for Christmas, and was wearing workout clothes that probably cost more than my car payment. "Big session today?" I asked innocently, not looking up from my morning crossword puzzle. "Yeah, this new client is really motivated. Might take a few hours," he said, checking his reflection in the hallway mirror one more time. "Well, you certainly look motivated too," I said, allowing just a hint of sarcasm to creep into my voice. He kissed the top of my head, the same perfunctory gesture he had been giving me for months. "Love you, babe. Don't wait up if I'm late." I watched him leave, and as soon as his truck disappeared down the street, I put the second phase of my plan into motion. I called Vincent's mother, Doris, who lived about 20 minutes away in Scottsdale. "Doris, it's Karen. Are you busy today? I was thinking we could have a girls' day. Maybe brunch and pedicures." Doris was delighted. At 74, she didn't get as many social invitations as she used to, and she had always liked me better than Vincent probably deserved. She had been making subtle comments lately about how Vincent seemed different, and how she hoped he was treating me well. "That sounds wonderful, honey. Should I pick you up?" "Actually, I'll come get you. I need to get out of the house for a while." Perfect. This would establish my alibi and ensure that I was nowhere near the scene when Vincent and his flexibility student discovered my little modification to their afternoon plans. I picked up Doris at noon, and we headed to a trendy brunch spot in Old Town Scottsdale. She was wearing one of her colorful pantsuits and had clearly put effort into her appearance, excited for our outing. As we settled into our booth, I felt a twinge of guilt about involving her in my revenge plot, even indirectly. But I also knew that if my plan worked, she would eventually learn the truth about her son's behavior anyway. "You look lovely today, Karen, but you seem a little tense. Is everything all right with you and Vincent?" Doris asked, studying me over her reading glasses as she perused the menu. "Oh, you know how it is. Marriage has its ups and downs," I said, taking a sip of my mimosa. "Vincent's been working a lot lately. Lots of new clients who need extra attention." Doris said, and something in her tone made me look up. "He's always been popular with the ladies, even as a boy. Sometimes I worry that he inherited too much of his father's charm and not enough of his sense." This was the most direct Doris had ever been about Vincent's character flaws, and it surprised me. I had always assumed she was blind to her son's faults the way most mothers are. Has he said anything to you about his work lately? I asked carefully. He mentioned some young woman who's been taking up a lot of his time. Said she was very dedicated but needed specialized training. Doris paused, then added with a knowing look. I've been around long enough to know what specialized training usually means when it comes to pretty young women and men going through midlife crises. I nearly choked on my mimosa. Doris. Oh, honey, I'm not blind. Vincent's father went through the same thing when he turned 50. Started buying sports cars and dating his secretary. She reached across the table and patted my hand. The difference is, you're not the kind of woman who will put up with that nonsense, and Vincent's not smart enough to realize what he's about to lose. We spent the next 2 hours talking about everything, except Vincent's infidelity, though it hung in the air between us like desert heat. Doris told me stories about her late husband's indiscretions, and how she had handled them with a combination of dignity and strategic revenge that impressed me more than I cared to admit. The key, she said, as we walked to the nail salon, is to make sure the punishment fits the crime and that they learn something from it. Men like Vincent and his father think they're so clever, but they're really just predictable. At 3 p.m., as we were having our toenails painted in matching shades of coral pink, my phone buzzed with a text from Vincent. Session running long. Probably won't be home until late. Don't wait up. I showed the message to Doris, who rolled her eyes. Right on schedule, she said. His father used to send me the exact same kinds of messages. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me as I stared at my phone. By now, Vincent and Kylie were probably well into their flexibility training session. I imagined them in whatever private location they had been using for their encounters, thinking they were so clever and discreet. I pictured Vincent reaching for his special lubricant, confident in his routine, completely unaware that his wife had turned his tool of infidelity into an instrument of justice. You know what, Doris? I said, settling back in my pedicure chair. I think today is going to be a very good day. She smiled at me with the satisfaction of a woman who had seen this story before and knew exactly how it was going to end. By 4 p.m., Doris and I were browsing through an antique shop in Old Town, admiring vintage jewelry and sharing stories about our younger days. The afternoon was proceeding exactly as I had planned. A perfect alibi filled with receipts, witnesses, and timestamps that would prove I was nowhere near the scene of what I hoped was about to unfold. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text from Vincent, but a notification from the neighborhood app that someone in my area was reporting unusual emergency vehicle activity. I felt my pulse quicken, but I kept my expression neutral as I continued examining a vintage bracelet. Oh my, Doris said, looking at her own phone. My neighbor is posting about fire trucks in your neighborhood. I hope everything's all right. Fire trucks? I asked, putting just the right amount of concern in my voice. I hope none of our neighbors are having an emergency. We finished our shopping and I drove Doris home, keeping the conversation light and avoiding the urge to check my phone constantly. When I finally dropped her off at her house, she squeezed my hand before getting out of the car. Whatever happens next, dear, remember that you deserve better than what you've been getting. And sometimes, the universe has a way of making sure people get exactly what they deserve. The drive back to my neighborhood felt both eternal and too short. As I turned onto my street, I could see a small crowd of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, many holding their phones and talking in excited whispers. The emergency vehicles were gone, but the air of scandal remained. I parked in my driveway and walked over to my neighbor Janet, who was practically vibrating with excitement. Karen, you just missed all the drama. The fire department had to respond to that Airbnb house 3 doors down. Apparently 2 people got stuck together during, she paused dramatically, intimate activities. Stuck together? I asked, allowing my eyes to widen with genuine curiosity. Some kind of adhesive accident. The paramedics couldn't separate them, so they had to call in the fire department with special equipment. They carried them out on stretchers, still attached, covered in bed sheets. It was like something out of a movie. Another neighbor, Bob, chimed in. My wife got the whole thing on her Ring camera. They're saying it might go viral. The guy looked familiar, though. Wasn't he that trainer from the gym on 32nd Street? My heart was pounding with a mixture of satisfaction and disbelief. It had actually worked. The plan had gone better than I could have imagined. "The trainer from Sundale Fitness?" I asked innocently. "I think my husband works there. I hope it wasn't anyone we know." "Hard to tell with the bed sheets," Janet said. "But whoever it was is going to have a lot of explaining to do. The fire chief said they'd never seen anything like it. Apparently, whatever they used was industrial strength." I excused myself and went inside, my hands shaking slightly as I closed the front door behind me. In the quiet of my kitchen, I allowed myself a moment of pure, unadulterated satisfaction. Vincent had spent months thinking he was so clever, so discreet, so much smarter than his boring wife who spent her days managing employee benefits and workplace safety protocols. But he had forgotten that his boring wife was very, very good at managing situations that required attention to detail, strategic planning, and an understanding of cause and effect. My phone rang. Vincent's number appeared on the screen, and I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. And again. I made myself a cup of tea and settled in to wait for whatever explanation he was going to try to give me. Vincent finally came home at 8 p.m., 3 hours later than usual, walking stiffly and looking like he had been through a war zone. His hair was disheveled, his clothes were different from what he had left in that morning, and his face was flushed with what I could only describe as a combination of humiliation and barely contained panic. "Hey, babe," he said, trying to sound casual but failing spectacularly. "How was your day with my mom?" "Wonderful," I replied, not looking up from my book. "We had brunch, got pedicures, did some shopping. Very relaxing. How was your training session?" I watched him struggle with how much to tell me. His jaw worked silently for several moments before he settled on. "It was challenging. Had to cut it short because of an emergency." "Oh no, what kind of emergency?" I asked with perfect concern. "I hope your client is okay." She'll be fine. Just a minor accident at the gym. Nothing serious." The beauty of Vincent's situation was that he couldn't tell me the truth without admitting to his affair, but he also couldn't come up with a believable lie that would explain why he looked like he had been through a medical emergency. He was trapped between his infidelity and his pride, and watching him squirm was more satisfying than I had anticipated. "That's terrible. What kind of accident?" I pressed gently. "Just equipment malfunction. The gym is handling it. Insurance and all that." He was sweating now, despite our air conditioning. "I'm going to take a shower." "Good idea," I said sweetly. "By the way, Janet mentioned there was some excitement in the neighborhood today. Fire trucks and ambulances at that Airbnb house down the street. Some kind of unusual emergency." Vincent froze halfway to the bathroom, his face going pale. "Really? Huh. Didn't hear about that. She said 2 people got stuck together somehow. Can you imagine? What are the odds of something like that happening on the same day you had an equipment malfunction at work?" The look on Vincent's face was priceless. Pure terror mixed with the dawning realization that his wife might know more than she was letting on. Over the next few days, the full scope of the disaster became clear. The Ring camera footage had indeed gone viral, racking up millions of views across social media platforms. While Vincent and Kylie's faces weren't clearly visible due to the bedsheets, enough identifying details were shown that people in the local fitness community quickly figured out who they were. Sundale Fitness fired Vincent immediately, citing a morals clause in his employment contract and the negative publicity affecting their business. Several of his other clients canceled their sessions, not wanting to be associated with the scandal. Kylie, who had been building a social media following as a fitness influencer, found her comments sections flooded with jokes about being stuck on her trainer and getting really bonded during workouts. The local news picked up the story as a humorous human interest piece, though they were careful not to name names. The anchor delivered the report with barely suppressed laughter, describing it as a cautionary tale about reading labels carefully. and proof that some workout equipment requires professional handling. Vincent tried to maintain his innocence for exactly 3 days before the weight of evidence and social media humiliation broke him down. He confessed everything while I sat at our kitchen table, drinking coffee and listening with the patience of someone who already knew every detail he was about to share. It just happened, Karen. I didn't plan it. She was just so young and enthusiastic, and you and I had been distant for so long, and she made me feel like I was still attractive and vital. And the lubricant under your truck seat? I asked calmly. His face crumpled. How long have you known? Long enough to make an informed decision about our marriage, I replied, sliding the divorce papers across the table toward him. The satisfaction of watching him realize that his betrayal had been discovered, documented, and systematically punished was worth every moment of planning I had put into this revenge. Vincent's affair, and the humiliating circumstances of its exposure, cost him far more than just his marriage. Word spread quickly through Phoenix's tight-knit fitness community, making it nearly impossible for him to find work as a personal trainer. He eventually took a job at a big box store, stocking shelves for a fraction of his previous income. Kylie deleted her social media accounts and moved back to Ohio to live with her parents, her influencer dreams destroyed by memes and mockery. The viral video followed both of them everywhere, a permanent reminder of their poor choices and their underestimation of a woman they thought was too boring to fight back. They had learned, in the most public way possible, that actions have consequences, and that sometimes those consequences come with industrial-strength adhesive. I kept the house in the divorce settlement and used my share of Vincent's retirement account to finally take that trip to Italy I had always wanted. As I sat in a cafe in Rome, watching the sunset over ancient streets and sipping wine that cost more than Vincent's daily wages, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me to this moment of peace. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. It's about precision, patience, and ensuring that justice is served with just the right amount of permanent adhesive.